So I'm one of those kind of people that just loves to build things. Anything really. It can be a new engine for one of my cars, an RC model, a new studio, or even an extension on the house. One of the most interesting parts of owning a PC for me is the initial build. So when I heard that Cooler Master has a new case that the user builds entirely themselves, I was really interested to take a look. So this is what I'm talking about, the Cooler Master QUBE 500 flat pack. It's essentially a flat pack PC case that you build yourself. But is it any good? Let's find out.
EK Nucleus AIO, your first step towards efficient cooling.
So normally with a case review, I'd have the case here ready. I'd talk about some of the specs and features, availability, price, and then I'd run through some of the details of the case, take a closer look at it, build a system, and then give you my views on it in the end. I'm going to be doing this a little bit differently today because this is different to a normal case. According to Cooler Master, part of the build process is the unboxing of the QUBE 500. So what I want to do is run you through the whole experience really that somebody would have that buys the case, unboxes it, assembles it and builds the system in, rather than doing just a normal case review. And I'll let you know what I think of it as I go through the video. So this is the QUBE 500 flat pack. It's obviously a flat pack PC case. Looks like something you would get from IKEA maybe in a brown cardboard box. It's obviously a lot smaller than the packaging for a standard case that comes pre-assembled, and that's one of the reasons for this idea. It's part of Cooler Master's new eco-friendly initiative. So this obviously takes up less space in storage, less space in shipping, so it is more eco-friendly. It is available in a couple of different versions. So there is the standard version that's either available in black or white, and they come with one rear non-RGB sickle flow edge 120mm fan, a black and grey handlebar, a black and grey gem mini, which is one of the accessories, and it also includes two black or white dust filters for the case. The other version is the Macaron limited edition. It comes with one ARGB fan, a grey handlebar and a mint coloured handlebar, and it also comes with a grey mini gem accessory, two accessory hooks and two dust filters in mint, cream and pink, because it is kind of a multicoloured version, I believe, the Macaron. In terms of the price, the standard version is $79 or £79, and the limited edition Macaron is $99 or £99. Before I get on to actually unboxing it and building it, I do just want to run through some of the features of the case first. So it's a flat pack case, part of Cooler Master's eco-friendly initiative. It requires 45% less packaging compared to a standard pre-assembled case. The production costs are no different to a standard or regular pre-assembled case because the panels need to be made from a thicker or stronger material, as they need to be more rigid in this flat pack design. Cooler Master also says the case features next level customization with swappable colours, a customizable system layout, plus a large ecosystem for accessories. The total volume of the case is 33 litres. I think Cooler Master said the average ATX case is around about 50 litres. But there's also space in this compact design for up to 8 fans, 3 radiators, 6 3.5-inch hard drives, 3 2.5-inch SSD drives, plus up to 365mm of space for graphics cards, which Cooler Master says should allow most 4090s to be installed inside the case. It also supports an eATX motherboard, but that depends on where you install the power supply, or should I say, it depends on which type of power supply you use. In the review guide that came with the QUBE 500 flat pack, there is a link to a series of videos that kind of runs you through the assembly process. You can see I've got those up on screen there. I'm going to follow those videos. Normally I'd probably just rip the box open and build it however way I see fit, but I want to follow the videos and see how easy or how difficult it is to build the case and the system following Cooler Master's instructions. It does say, or it does show you in the video, it's a good idea to install the hardware as you're assembling the case. So I'm going to follow the order that Cooler Master suggests and see how easy or how difficult it actually is. I've not looked at the case at all, not had it out of the box, not even opened the box. This is the factory seal, so you are getting to kind of go through the experience of building as I do it myself as well. So any reactions you see will be genuine reactions to what's happening. So step one says to remove the motherboard tray. This is the motherboard tray, and you can see there's a power cable that's pre-routed there. There's also a user guide, what looks like there, in several different languages. And then the second step will be to install the power supply mount. I believe you install the power supply at the same time as well. A few accessories there, looks like a load of rubber grommets for what looks like the drive screws, packs of screws in there as well. We can remove this part of the box. And then underneath is another panel. I guess this is the rear panel because it's got the 120mm sickle flow edge fan pre-installed. And then another panel which is either the top or the front. I think that's the top panel, and you can see on here there's two USB type A ports and a USB 3.2 Gen 2 type C port, and then a combined 3.5mm jack for audio and microphone. Remove another bit of foam packaging. This doesn't look very eco-friendly to me. I believe Cooler Master did try and replace this foam packaging with some more eco-friendly cardboard, but I don't think it was a feasible design. But then underneath got a couple more panels, so I'm guessing this one's either the floor or the roof. And then another panel. Again, this could be the front or the roof. Another bit of foam packaging. That looks like one of the side panels. The 4 plastic feet, we've got rubberized pads on there, anti-vibration pads. This is one of the mounts for radiators, so I believe this fits on the left-hand side of the case. It's got like a hinge fitting, and you can remove that if you don't want to use that. Bit more foam to remove, and then I think this is the last piece, which is the left-hand tempered glass side panel. Looks like it has a slight tint to it, but it isn't too dark, and I think that is 4mm tempered glass, so it's quite thick tempered glass. So the first step of the assembly is to install the motherboard to the motherboard tray. You can see I've already pre-installed the CPU, which is an Intel Core i7-12700K, and the SSD drive, which is a WD-BAC SN850 2TB drive, and the motherboard is the MSI MEG Z690 Unify. So turn it round the correct way up. This is the bottom of the motherboard tray. Just place it over the standoffs. They all seem to line up pretty well, and the middle one is one of those locator standoffs with a little bit that sticks up through the motherboard tray. Screw the motherboard in place, and you have to use the coarse thread screws. Second step of the assembly, according to the videos, is the power supply and the power supply mount. There's several different locations where you can install the power supply. 3 slots on the motherboard tray, which puts the power supply at the front of the case, or you can install it on the floor. I think I'm going to choose one of these motherboard slots, and then the power supply will be at the front of the case. I think on the floor it might interfere with the graphics card, so I'm going to go for one of those motherboard mounts. Power supply I'm using is this CoolerMaster GX3850 Gold. It's an ATX 3.0 PCIe 5 power supply. So we need to attach the power supply to the bracket and see if I get this the right way around. So I think it goes that way around. You can see the screw holes lined up there. The video tells you to use the coarse thread screws. The ones that come with the case, they're all silver. So I'm going to use the ones that come with the power supply. So they're the same thread, but they're black. I think they'll look better. So screw those onto the power supply. It actually just mounts with 3 screws to the power supply. And then this should just somehow slot into place on the front here. So I think I'll go for the top slot. That's quite good actually. It slots into there pretty nicely. And then when you stand this up, you see it's like that, and then this will be the front of the case. So you can use this extension cable, connect that up. Plenty of slack on that extension cable, probably a little bit too much, but I guess that's because you can put it in various different locations. Next step of the installation or the assembly is to install the rear panel to the motherboard tray. You can see the rear panel comes with a 120mm sickle flow edge fan. It's a PWM fan. I think it runs up to about 1800 RPM. One thing to notice about this is there's only 5 PCIe slot covers that come in the rear panel. I believe again this is another eco-friendly saving measure from Cooler Master. Obviously less steel in the production being used is more eco-friendly. We need to pop this onto the back of the motherboard tray. Watch that cable, that actually gets in the way. You could slip up there really and get that stuck behind the rear I/O if you weren't careful. So that pops on there, and again it's just some of the coarse thread screws that hold this together. I think there's 4 screws to go in this rear panel. At this point you can also install the graphics card, but there is an accessory that I just want to show you. So this comes with the standard edition of the case, and this is technically a vertical GPU mount, and what it does is it just slots in position on one of the rear PCIe slots, and then you can just slot your graphics card in vertically mounted and attach it to that bracket with a couple of screws. I didn't plan to run the graphics card vertically. I think for now I'll keep it horizontally as I was going to, but I might switch to that depending on how I install the floor or what I install on the floor, whether I install any fans or anything there. But for now I'm not going to use that vertical graphics card mount. I'm just going to mount it horizontally, and you can now install the graphics card now you've got this far. So graphics card is this RTX 4080 Inno 3D iChill card. It's a 3-slot card, so I need to actually remove another one of those PCIe slot covers from the back. So screw out, remove that cover, and then now I should be able to slot this in pretty easily. Not too bad, slots in it okay, but this bit of steel here slightly gets in the way of as you're trying to install it, but it's not a big deal. You can get around it, no problems. And then you need to pop some screws in there, so we need 3 screws in the back. You notice that all the screws so far, you have to use a screwdriver. They're not thumb screws. Would have liked to have seen a few thumb screws in here, especially on this PCIe panel at the back. So I can install the front panel next, and as you can see, all the cabling for the front IOs there. As I said earlier, on the front I/O, 2 USB Type A ports, a USB Type C port, and then a combined 3.5mm jack for audio. And there's also the power button on there. And according to the video, this dust filter removes. So quite a hefty dust filter. It's actually more like a bit of a trim panel, and then inside there is the dust filter that would come out separately for cleaning. So that's the outer front panel, and then this is the inner part, and you can see on here there's mounts for fans and radiators. I believe you can install 2 120 or 2 140 fans and up to a 280mm radiator. This is the top here, and this is the top, so that needs to go up there somewhere, and then slot that in place. 4 of these screws that hold it on. Starting to look a bit more like a PC case, although it's got a lot of vented panels on it. All the panels are perforated steel, but you can see with this graphics card there's not a lot of space there, so it'd be quite difficult to fit a radiator and fans, I guess, on there. You should be able to squeeze a fan in there just. Next panel to install is the floor. It looks quite similar to the front panel. It has a magnetic dust filter on there, so that'll be easy to remove for cleaning purposes. Again, it's heavily ventilated, perforated steel, and there is the same type of mounts on here as you had on the front panel for installing fans and radiators. So you can fit up to two 120s, two 140 fans, or up to a 280mm radiator. If you want to install some fans on here, you could do that before you install it to the case. But as I say, I'm not that well prepared at the moment with this. I'm just really going along with it as I see fit. So I might install some fans to the floor later. That seems to go in position pretty easily, and then it is held in place with several screws. So I just threaded those front I/O cables down out of the way, because the next step, according to CoolerMaster's videos, is to install the top panel. Now I'm planning on installing a 240mm AIO in this top panel. I'm just hoping there's enough space here between the power supply and the other side of the case. According to the specs, I should be able to fit a 240 or even a 280, I think, with the power supply up there. So the top panel is very similar again. It's got one of these trim panels on the top of it, and very much like the front panel, it's got a dust filter in there as well. You could potentially remove that, that's just held in place. It's just one of those thin perforated steel dust filters. And again, the inner part of the top panel is very similar to the front, heavily ventilated, perforated steel, and you've got the same 120 and 140mm mounts on here, so you can install two 120 or two 140 fans, or up to a 280mm radiator. So this just connects into the case like the floor did, really. So you just slot it in. Sounds easier than it is actually, for some reason. I think the power supply cable was getting in the way slightly. Just move that out of the way. So that's it, just got to watch out for that. The power supply cable got in the way a little bit there. Could have trapped the power supply cable, which would have been a bit of a problem. But then again, a couple of screws to hold it in at this side. Just pop a couple of screws in there. So now it is definitely starting to look more like a regular PC case. It is quite compact, as CoolerMaster says, with the 33 litre capacity. I guess at this point it would be a good idea to decide where you want your feet to be installed. So whether you want to put them on the top and run it inverted, or put it on the floor. I'm just going to install the feet to the floor of the case, as I'm going to run it in a normal layout. You can see they are just plastic feet with these rubber pads on, anti-vibration, and I believe they should just clip in place. So they look pretty easy to install. Get them the right way around. So there's 4 feet, they should be pretty easy to clip on and off in case you do want to change the orientation and the layout of the case. You can quite easily unclip those. I'm going to leave the dust filter off for now, so I might add some fans to that. The last couple of assembly videos from CoolerMaster just talk about how you install the side panels and this fan stroke radiator bracket on the side here, so I'm not going to bore you with that. It's pretty simple, but that did get me looking around the case a bit more to see if there's anything I've missed and anything worth pointing out. In terms of storage drive compatibility, the review guide that came with it was a bit vague and contradicted itself in a few things, but in terms of 3.5 inch drives, so you have got one 3.5 inch drive mount on here. There is one in the roof of the case here and one on the floor there, and if you flip the case round, there's also a 3.5 inch drive mount here. In terms of 2.5 inch drives, there's 2 on the back of the motherboard tray there, another one here, so you've got at least 3 2.5 inch drive mounts, which should be enough. I've also noticed as well on here, you've got marks for DDC and D5, so there's a DDC stroke D5 pump mount here and one here. But if you flip the case back round this way, you'll see the power supply is in the way of this top mount. So if you want to install a DDC or D5 pump, power supply is going to have to fit at the bottom. Looking at the space between graphics card and the bottom of the case, an ATX power supply in there is not going to work with a card like this, but I suppose if you put a water block on the graphics card, it's going to make it a much smaller, or potentially you could fit an SFX power supply in there. I don't know how easy it's going to be to install D5 pumps and radiators. I suppose with the power supply out of the way and down there, There will be space for a DDC or D5 pump res combo there. Maybe space for a radiator, but I'm not sure how that would work. I think that might interfere. But you've still got space at the top for a radiator. But then with the power supply at the bottom, that kind of blocks off the bottom for any radiator installation. So the case does technically support custom water cooling, but I think there will be some limitations with that. Another thing as well with this fan stroke radiator bracket, it's a bit weird really, because I've just been looking through the manual as well, and you have to mount this here or here on this hinge mount. So if you install that in either of those places, it's it'll be a bit weird installing that and then installing some fans and a radiator there and putting a tempered glass panel right in front of it. There's going to be no airflow whatsoever with a tempered glass panel in front of that and some fans or a radiator there. I guess it is designed for a steel panel that's got mesh on it to be put on this side rather than the tempered glass panel, but even in the user guide it shows the tempered glass panel being put there, which could cause a problem for a more novice user that's not aware of how airflow works, and slapping a tempered glass panel up on there is going to cause some problems, I guess, with CPU temperature if you've got your radiator installed there. So definitely wouldn't recommend that. I'm not going to bother using that. I think the plan is to install a 240mm AIO at the top, put some fans in the bottom, tidy up the cables and see where that takes us. It is tight for 240mm AIO installation at the top with the power supply there, but it does just fit. You can just slide in the 240 AIO there and get your screw mounts in. I say it's very tight. There's literally a couple of millimeters of space to the radiator and the power supply. But if you want to use a decent size dual tower air cooler, this is the new CoolerMaster M824 Stealth. This is about 170mm tall, and that would fit in there, just probably a couple of millimeters of clearance to the tempered glass side panel. The only thing I would say about that, if you're installing a fan on the front here and you have to lift it up for ram clearance, then I think you'll be struggling to install that cooler in this case. But it looks like there is space for a decent sized cooler and a 240mm AIO at the top. So I'm going to tidy the cables up, install a few fans and just finish things off, and then we'll come back and see how it performs in terms of thermals. So build's complete, system's up and running. I actually quite like how it looks because of this compact design, and using just a kind of a regular build with just an AIO. You probably get the same effect with an air cooler as well. The case looks full. There's no like wasted space and big gaps in the hardware, which can sometimes look a bit odd, but everything's pretty neatly organized and it fills out the whole case, which I like. I quite like this concept as well. It's not that much different to building in a normal pre-assembled case. It just adds a different dimension to the build process. And if you're like me and you like building things, then you will probably like this case and you will like assembling it and building your system in it at the same time. I ended up adding a couple of fans to the floor, so I put two Noctua NF F12 Chromax black fans on the floor, and they are as intake, so pulling some cool air in from the bottom of the case. And also for symmetry and just for the looks of the system, I swapped out the CoolerMaster Sickle Flow fan for another Noctua NF F12 in the back, and that's an exhaust. So I like how it looks, and I like the concept of the case. In terms of the thermals, we run the same thermal test that I do with all case tests, so it's a combined Cinebench R23 and 3D Mark Speedway, so they're running simultaneously for 30 minutes. Thermal performance is an interesting one with the Cube 500 flat pack. With the case in its default configuration with all panels and filters installed, GPU temperature seems okay with an average delta of 43 degrees C. But the CPU runs hot with a top mounted AIO. The average delta was measured at 66 degrees Celsius, which means the actual peak CPU temperature was in the mid to high 90s, which isn't great for this CPU. CPU. Removing the tempered glass side panel reduced temperature. However, we found that removing all the dust filters from the case gave a significant drop in CPU temperature by almost 10 degrees Celsius, which is quite alarming. When you look closer at the dust filters, you soon realize that the perforations in the filters are tiny at approximately 0.8 to 1 millimeter, which means the airflow is severely restricted and the fans struggle to push heat out of the top of the case or pull cool air in. So these dust filters to me seem like it's a bit of a missed opportunity with this Cube 500 from Cooler Master. The whole chassis is really open. It's got perforations in all of the side panels, even the right hand side panel where there's no real need for it. So it seems like a missed opportunity in terms of airflow because of these restrictive dust filters that are fitted to every panel. You can remove the dust filters and run it without them. Airflow is greatly improved by doing that, but there's two problems with it. Obviously, you're going to get more dust into the system, so you're going to be cleaning the system out more regularly. The other thing with it as well, when you remove the dust filters, the large circular perforations on the outer panels allow you to see through to the perforations on the inner panels, and for me it all looks a bit messy. It completely ruins the aesthetics and the look of the case, so it's not an optimal solution by removing the dust filters. It would be better if, in our testing, it would be better if the perforations on the dust filters were bigger, and they would obviously increase airflow, let more heat out of the top and more cool air in through the bottom where we got these fans mounted. We did reach out to Cooler Master about this issue. Thank you for bringing this point to our attention. We have done internal testing with different configurations. We didn't find as big of a difference in temperature as you experienced from this testing, but we will do more extensive testing trying to replicate your results. If we can verify the results with these testing, we can change the filter design as you have suggested. So we'll wait and see what Cooler Master comes up with after their extra testing with different filters and configurations. Hopefully they will see the same problems as we did and improve the design, because it should be pretty simple for them to change the design of the filters, just make the perforations bigger, and it should improve the airflow. And no matter what configuration you run in, then you shouldn't run into these problems like we did with the high CPU temperature. So as a concept, I do like this Cube 500. I like the fact that you kind of start the build right from the moment you take the case out of the box, or even while you're taking the case out of the box. As I say, I love building things, so for me this concept really appeals. Customizations as well will be a bonus for some people. There's obviously a big modding community and people that like to personalize the system, so that will be obviously a bonus for those users. Options for layout, so being able to move the power supply around, and the fact that you can even put the case in different orientations. You can stand it on its end, you can stand it on its top, and even run an inverted layout. Again, that will be a bonus for some people. In terms of cooling, there are some decent cooling options, so you can technically fit two 280mm radiators in it and up to something like 8 fans, but there are some compromises with that. Obviously, with the power supply at the front, it's very difficult to install any fans or radiators at the front. Perhaps if you had a shorter graphics card, you might get 1 fan at the front. If you move the power supply to the floor of the case, it's probably going to interfere with the graphics card. Also, if you put the power supply on the floor, then airflow from the bottom is going to be compromised as well. So although it does technically support multiple radiators, it looks quite difficult to get them all crammed into there. Another good thing is the cable management. So around the right hand side there are plenty of channels to run cables in, plenty of places to tie down cables. There aren't any Velcro straps included with the case though, which probably would have been a bonus because they do look like they would accept some Velcro straps on those tie down points, and plenty of cutouts around the motherboard tray in the right places where you want them. They don't have grommets on, but to be fair, you don't really notice with everything being quite compact and not a lot of space inside the case once your system's built. However, there are some negatives to the case. Even with all the side panels installed, so even if you put the glass on here and you've got all the screws in, there are actually some optional screws that you can put in. Even with all the panels on and the screws in, there still is a bit of flex in the chassis, which you don't see normally with pre-assembled cases when all the panels are on, especially if they're of decent quality. As I said, airflow the restriction with the filters, that seems to be a missed opportunity, because it is technically, the core design is a really open and it is potential for good airflow. So I think CoolerMaster's missed an opportunity there by sticking those restrictive dust filters in. And I'm really confused about this side fan stroke radiator bracket. I can't understand the thought process with this at all. Installed on this side of the case, any fans or radiators mounted on there are going to be slammed right up to the tempered glass side panel, so any airflow through that is going to be completely blocked off. Yes, you could potentially take the right hand vented side panel off, put it on this side, but then that would mean you have to run the tempered glass side panel on the other side and show all the cable mess. I'm not sure that anybody's really going to do that. The answer would be to include an additional side panel with the case that is vented, and then this bracket on the side with fans and radiators would work. As I said, the radiator and fan positioning can be compromised by the power supply and the graphics card, and for me the lack of 360mm radiator support is going to be a problem. It's going to limit the hardware that you can run inside the case. So if you wanted to run a i9-13900K or some of the high power AMD CPUs, you'll be struggling on anything less than a 360mm radiator. 280 might just work if you find a good 280mm AIO, but I don't think 280mm radiators are easy to install in here. I think if you want to install a 280 in the top, you'd have to drop the power supply right down, and if you do that, then the cables on the back of the power supply might interfere with the graphics card, which they did in this system with this graphics card and power supply arrangement. So maybe CoolerMaster has a bigger version of this coming. Hopefully they do, and hopefully they'll have one that supports 360mm radiators, and hopefully they'll find the same problems as we did with the thermals in their own testing and swap those dust filters for less restrictive ones. I hope you enjoyed watching this review of the CoolerMaster QUBE 500 flat pack. Let me know what you think of this case in the comment section. If you have enjoyed watching this review, then give us a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. If you enjoy what we do here at Kit Guru and you want to help support us, you can always head over to our store, pick up some merch, or you could even subscribe to our Patreon. And as always, if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to the website.